Morning, everybody. Thank you guys for being here. So we are here today to talk about Corda, of course, and about SIA Chain, which is our first product in production using Corda Enterprise. Uh, why managing a distributed network on a common infrastructure pattern? It's because we are trying to fit all the distributed ledger technologies into our legacy way of managing infrastructure. So you have the usual availability, the usual backup and disaster recovery, mixed with the distributed ledger technology. It's super tough. We still are improving the high availability of the infrastructure, but it's up and running and online right now. So what is SIA Chain actually? SIA Chain is the reconciliation between all the Italian banks. So we have got this challenge of bringing the whole Italian financial system into Corda, a private Corda network. So the idea was born on 2017, and the first challenge of this project was to put all the banks together. It's super hard to build the community. This is the first challenge of the distributed ledgers. The second one, which was past year, put all the ideas into practice, built a proof of concept, start the first beta tests, the first application and infrastructure tests to see where we need to go and how can we achieve that. On the second part of the last year, we got, let's say, the first stable version to do internal tests in SIA. And on this year, we are finally into user acceptance test and now into production. How did we do it? I will start from the challenge we faced in order to build this infrastructure. So the first of all, and the hardest to achieve is cost constraint, because to build this infrastructure, by now, it's almost impossible to have it cheap and at the same time efficient. So mixing cost control with efficiency, it's super hard on blockchain. This was our first challenge. The second one, the business continuity, which was the one I just talked before. How to manage a distributed ledger having the business continuity of the legacy systems. How can I ensure that in front of a natural disaster or a connectivity issue or any hardware issue, I need all my clients to keep up and running 24/7. This was the second toughest challenge, since most of permissioned blockchains or distributed ledger, they don't have any native high availability or disaster recovery tools. And thanks to R3 for that, because they helped a lot on building the tools and the libraries we need. We are still working on that, but thanks God it's up and running. Third, which is the one I already talked before, find the right partners. First of all, you need to build the community, which is super hard. After that, you need partners, technology partners, to help you to design it, to develop it, and to implement it. And this is the case of NTT, which is our partner, PwC, and so on. The last of all is how can we apply a legacy monitoring system and analytics into a distributed ledger and distributed information that's going through and from everywhere on the network. This is the last one that we are addressing right now. We already got, let's say, 95% of the monitoring and analytics ready, but still have a lot to do because everything is new, it's innovation, so we are still working on that. But in our opinion, based on our experience, these are the four main challenges in order to go from a POC to a production-ready environment. How did you do it on the infrastructure part? So SIA kind of cloned the idea of Corda. Let's try to translate it. Instead of having a public distributed network, we have a private network with all the central services of Corda, like Notary, Dorman, and Network Map, inside of SIA. So it's a 100% private network with all the authentication, identity management, KYC, and PKI managed by SIA. How does it work? All the nodes of the banks are configured and managed by SIA, and they reach SIA through the SIA net, which is our private network that we use for all the financial Italian system. This is, we call in Italy like RNI, is our network for the national Italian banks. The problem is that this network is used for the whole payments and also exchanging of currencies between the banks in Italy and also in Europe. So it's a super delicate network where you need to bring a new system without impacting the current system that we have up and running on SIANet. Each one of these clients has its own network access to the SIANet, so each service of the SIANet has its own hardware devices dedicated for the business continuity purposes and also for performance purposes. We don't want any services impacting other services that we already have. On a more detailed view, you have here how can a bank node have high availability, disaster recovery, and at the same time being connected to all our central services. So here we are using legacy strategy of high availability and disaster recovery. So we are using legacy synchronous replica between our databases and also using legacy virtualization replicas in order to solve any hardware issue or any software issue that we can have it. As you may see here, all these components are quite old, so we have a complete legacy infrastructure using firewalls, proxies to balance, and VMware in order to have the hardware availability. If you notice, we are missing some components from Corda here, like the bridge, float firewall, and so on. Why that? Because we found a lot of issues on terminating and reopening the session between the nodes, and also between the front ends and back ends and so on. So we tried to make it simple. We just removed a lot of components. We used a legacy infrastructure and tried to make a hybrid, make them working together in a hybrid infrastructure. So you have nothing new here, nothing magic. It's just a legacy infrastructure on support of the DLT. Here you have another detailed view of the high availability of Corda, on the Corda perspective. So all the Corda nodes active and standby, they are sharing the same message queue. So in case of any failure, the standby node is already up and running and with all the transactions and the flows ready to go. So we have zero loss of data and zero loss of services here. And how do we build it and which technologies that we are using to do it? As you see before, we are using VMware as our base of infrastructure, mixed with all these guys here. So we have legacy Red Hat operating systems that writes on legacy Postgres databases replicated between each other. We have Elasticsearch and ALK solution for analytics and monitoring of the application layer. We have Rubrik as a backup and disaster recovery solution. And of course, Corda Enterprise. How we do it? We work with Ansible to build all the inventory of all the hosts we want on the network, how they need to be configured, who and when needs to access it. And we added another abstraction layer, which is Docker. So you have the physical layer, you have the virtualization layer, and you have the container layer. So everything is structured and separated in order to avoid impacts between each other. And also for the disaster recovery, it's much easier to recover and redeploy a container instead of recovering the whole operating system. Also for regarding the delivery pipeline, we have already the automation pipeline ready and running. The only thing that's missing here, maybe, we want to now automate also the performance. So orchestrate the Docker containers automatically instead of deploying it manually using Ansible. It's super hard, super tough. It's on beta yet. By now, we just use Ansible to deploy the whole infrastructure with the Docker containers manually. And manually, we add or remove containers as per the request, the performance request. We are building also in SIA an API layer, which will be opened not only for Spunta project, which is this project, but for any Corda application that we want to run on this node. So the bank nodes, they are agnostic regarding the application, actually. Spunta is just the first application, but we are leaving a lot of REST APIs to run another applications on the same nodes. This is an even more detailed view on how the application works, how the operator of the banks accesses the application, and how the application writes on the Corda ledger and on the databases. So how does Spunta work? Spunta is based on the reconciliation of the end of the day for each bank. So at the end of the day, each bank accesses the system and see all the reconciliation they need to apply regarding the other banks or internally on the same group of banks. So we have a front end where the operator of the bank has access to the Spunta software. Once the operator reaches the front end, we have the identity provider, which is centrally in SIA. We recognize the operator, and the operator is inside the auxiliary node. We call it auxiliary node. These are two different virtual machines with two different containers, each one. So the operator of the bank has exclusively and only the view of the auxiliary node. So the bank is not allowed to go interact directly to the Corda node or directly to any database. Once the client is logged on Spunta, he's able to interact with the application on the Corda ledger and also with the other customers, of course. So each customer has its own front-end and auxiliary node and its own Corda enterprise node with its database. All of them are replicated inside of each client. And we have two kinds of clients here. We have the on-prem clients, which are the really distributed clients. They have all these nodes on premises, on a dedicated hardware, dedicated infrastructure. And we have also clients on SIA Cloud. So this is the particularity of SIA Chain, because all the banks or all the customers, they can choose whether to buy and manage the whole infrastructure by their own or just rely on SIA as a service. And this would be the idea behind it. Supernodes, we call them supernodes, resting on the premises, leverage the distributed ledger, of course. And we want to host multiple business networks on our node. We are not just building Spunta, we are building a distributed network that can be used for any kind of services in Italy or in the world. We have a lot of advanced use cases on Corda. Spunta is just the first one, just to get us ready to the production and how to learn with our mistakes. And the next ones will be much more advanced for the next year and so on. Another thing that we are trying to achieve with the SIA Chain project is have the governance of the entire network, the governance of the nodes, of the hardware, of anything, in order to, okay, the client has the freedom to choose whether manage the nodes by its own or through SIA. But at the same time, all the clients must follow our guidances and our best practices in order to achieve the SLA and the quality of service for the whole network. Otherwise, one client could damage the performance of the whole network in case of wrongly management or wrongly using the technology. And last of all, we are ready for mission-critical application. Since you already have the Corda up and running into production, and with high availability and disaster recovery systems. So this is the main idea of SIA chain. We are starting with Spunt, of course, but this will be the main idea. This is our achievement. That's me, and I'm available for any questions from you guys, or anything.
So this is quite interesting because I've been a big part of learning about how SIA have deployed Corda and used it across a network of a load of banks, basically.
It's 200 banks.
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions come in, and one of them's quite interesting, actually. So one of them's about, are there any plans to use AWS or Azure or any other cloud service instead of Red Hat, and if not, why?
Okay, no, we have any plans to use public clouds because one of the advantages of SIA is to ensure the clients that we have the complete private network. So you are completely protected from the internet. So no, we don't have any plans to go to the cloud. This is one of the strengths of the SIA chain. You are protected, you are closed, and you are interacting only with authorized partners and not with anyone from internet or any.
Okay, so say if one of the banks said, we want to host our node on Azure, would you allow them to do that, or is that part of the policies? Not by now. Okay, cool. And there is another question about HSMs.
That's good.
Do you have any special arrangements for key management? Are the keys in HSMs or just the local file system?
So we have both of them. We have local key stores, and we have also Gemalto HSMs, which we are working right now. So actually, this is a delicate part of the network because, yes, the client is also free to manage their keys by their own, but SIA doesn't suggest it. We are strongly suggesting the HSM for the keys and everything.
I don't know how many people here are actually in the kind of phase of deploying Corda or the architecture or anything like that, but I would strongly suggest you reach out to Felipe and the SIA team to talk about these things because they are really advanced in this deployment now. But I think that's it. That's actually end of time as well. So thanks very much, Felipe, and big round of applause.
Thank you, guys.